Alright, so to continue, so my last long-winded answer to the question of what's the precise quote again? The desire
to
be loved
is the last illusion.
Is the last illusion. So at this point, it'd be nice to clarify like why the desire to be loved, right? Why love is the last illusion. So just as a quick recap, before what I emphasized was that the spirit of that quote, as I interpret it, right, is a kind of Eastern philosophy type of notion, which is this desire to be loved being the last illusion has to do with the fact that attachment is the main issue we're trying to overcome, and then the last illusion is because it's probably the most difficult attachment, right? Like, who doesn't want to be loved, right? So this desire is pinpointed by this quote as the most difficult, right? That's what they're saying. Because we can kind of imagine, and I would sort of autobiographically say, I've overcome many attachments. I've spent, a week without food, fasting, so I can kind of detach from food and cravings of that kind of pleasure, right? I've abstained from any other thing, from material wealth. I can detach from that. I don't care about being famous, so I overcame that, right? So there's many things that I myself have overcome, and I think many people can overcome. You can detach from, wanting to be super successful and say, you know what, I'm okay with just one house, not 10 or whatever. So these things that are, external based material things can be quite reasonably overcome. But who can overcome wanting to be loved? That's probably the sign of an enlightened being, you might say, right? To the point of, or to show why that could be such a difficult thing to do, is I remember a story. Unfortunately, I don't remember the details, but someone said, I think I heard it from Gabor Mate, a pretty famous guy these days, wrote many books, and you can find them on YouTube. But I heard it from him, a story of like some nurses that were, I think, dealing with like premature babies. And somehow a certain group of babies were like nurtured by nuns, I think. So not even the mothers of these kids were the ones nursing them or just holding them. And the group of babies that were just held and showed some affection recovered and like became super healthy. And the ones who weren't, cared for or shown some affection stayed unhealthy, right? So just the fact that they were giving some attention, some love, some care was the only difference, and that's what made the difference to make them healthy. So that shows like how natural it is to want to be loved and want to have attention, right? So that's why I think that quote is interesting in saying that, look, this is the most natural attachment that we have. So if you can overcome that, you're a Buddha, right? I think that's what that means. And then to go a little deeper, part of the reason why that's such a big thing to overcome, if we think we should overcome it, that's a whole nother debate. But if that's something to be overcome from the Buddhist perspective, the reason is that attachment is very close to the notion of identity of our own self, i.e. the ego, right? In other words, one of the depictions of how we become attached is that like you have, something, let's say a piece of cake or whatever, it gives you pleasure. So you want more, you want to try a little more, and so you have it again, and you say, oh yeah, that's really good, and so you have it again. But that doesn't become a problem until you say, I want it, right? Unless you have a self-identity and you identify with this self, right, that had the experience, you won't have the attachment. So the source of the attachment is your I-ness, your ego-ness, your view of yourself, right? The person that you see yourself as being born in Brooklyn, that went to this school and has the sister and has these parents from India or whatever, right? And you have this identity constructed in your mind, and that identity is what attaches to things. So if you get rid of that identity, then you're unattached. So that's why, again, going back to the love being the last illusion, when you have that identity, that's what really needs the attention, the ego. That's perhaps the most fundamental need of the ego, right? To want to be loved or have this attention and be praised and admired, right? Aggrandized and so forth. So that's why it's so hard to let that go, because it's perhaps the source of the ego, right? Like our very first experience as children, little beings, is, mom. You want the attention and love of your mom. And that's what creates your ego. You want attention from your parents and your siblings, your friends, as at the earliest parts of your life. That's how you start to develop your ego, which then is the source of all your attachments. So that's why it really goes to the core there in saying that the desire to be loved is the last illusion. Now, another thing that we can add is something that comes from, in my mind, I'm relating this to the Christian tradition a little bit, from the philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, where he talks about, for example, romantic love or erotic love. And he says, just to give a kind of Christian side of things, I was explaining like a Buddhist perspective, but maybe this Christian side would help. So he says, erotic love is actually selfish, right? Romantic love, he says, is selfish because you're with this person because they make you feel good, right? So you're not with them for their sake, really. You're there because they make you happy. They make you feel this way. So if they stop giving you that kind of, satisfaction, you don't love them anymore. So is that real love, right? So this example that you have in Kierkegaard, where he's describing what we typically think of as love, he's describing that as selfishness, actually, right? So you might tie that to this quote, where the desire to be loved is the last illusion. It's because that's not real love, actually, right? Because if you're desiring to be loved, what you want is, this attention and to feel good, and therefore you're not being loving. And so that's not the highest that a human being could be. For Kierkegaard, he's saying, no, that's not true love, because that kind of selfish love is temporary. It has the ability to die, right? Because if you don't get what you want, then you hate the person. So is that love? No, he says real love has to be eternal. That's the real quality of love. Even in the Bible, it says the highest commandment Jesus gives is love your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your being, or whatever. And then he says, love your neighbor as yourself. None of that says so that you can get attention, so that you can be loved. So it's not about you, even in Christianity. In both Christianity and Buddhism, this desire to be loved could be seen as selfishness, actually, and something that you need to get rid of, an attachment that you need to get rid of. And if you can do that, you're a saint or enlightened. That's all I have to say.